Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wowhead Weekly number 217. I was so tempted to say 2020 there, but no, that's not the show number, that's the year. It is the first show of the year, and we are really, really excited to be back. And the timing is actually really perfect because patch 8.3 just hit all live servers this week. Before we get into that, let me introduce myself. My name is Annie, also known as Ada Fuchsia, and I am a Twitch streamer mostly, and also a co-host together with my lovely partner Perculia.
Hey everyone, I'm Perk. The cat is called Brightpaw. He's very excited to be back. We both are for the very first show of 2020, Wowhead Weekly 217, covering patch 8.3, Visions of N'Zoth, and no PTR
Yes.
for a change.
Mm-hmm.
We took a break with the holidays, but we are back to hit the ground running in 2020, and we even have an interesting guest lined up for next week.
We
So,
do. We actually
yes.
do. That is true.
So we will go over all the new things in the patch, some interesting interviews on patch 835, a new cinematic, and even some interesting classic news that occurred during our break. So,
Yes. So,
so
so,
why don't
so.
we
Mm-hmm.
start with the obvious stuff, which is patch 8.3 launched Tuesday in the US or Wednesday in the EU. And what is new? What should you be doing? And if you haven't played yet, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that might be interesting if you aren't playing and are thinking about maybe coming back into it.
I think that's a great way
So,
to start it off.
yeah. So, um, some of the major features of patch 8.3, allied races, mechanomes, and Volpera.
I was
You
so
can do.
excited to start a Volpera, and then I realized, wait, I don't have the reputation for it because I don't really play
Oh,
Horde. So I'm like, oh,
right.
I guess it's time to start the dailies for Voldenai now. So
Yep.
that was a very nice surprise. But yet, as an alliance player, I do have the reputations for mechanomes, so that's nice. At least I've got one half of the new allied races. But yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, go on.
So we've got those. We also have Death Knight. So if you were like, oh, the Volpera are cool, but I wish I was a Death Knight Volpera. Well, now you can be that. If you pre-purchase Shadowlands, you can be a Pandaren or an allied race Death Knight. And there is a very short quest line that you do that explains, why you are a recently raised character now working together with Bovar and the Ebon Blade. This was announced at BlizzCon.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty straightforward. You can earn heritage armor if you do things correctly. Pandaren don't have heritage armor. And you start at level 58 and not 55. And keep in mind, all that's going to be squished in Shadowlands.
Mm-hmm. And if you're not interested in heritage armor, let's say you don't have the biggest interest in transmog, but you are interested in achievements, do remember that there is an achievement for every single allied race, pretty much, I think, to
Mm-hmm.
get to level 110, which unlocks the heritage and also gives you achievement points. And yes, Death Knights are eligible. So you can, instead of starting at level 20 with all of the different races, you could potentially just make a bunch of DKs of every allied race to unlock all of those.
So, on to some of the max level stuff. We've talked about this before on the show, but since you can actually play it now, we definitely want to highlight this. There is this mega bright paw. This little stinker. He put his paw up and he just tilted this down. Does this look okay?
It
Should I
looks
retilt
fine
my
still.
camera?
No,
Okay.
it looks
All
fine.
right.
Mm-hmm.
He just put his paw and then he just flounced away. So max level content that you can do. Most of this is locked behind this mega introductory quest line that will unlock
Yes.
assaults, horrific visions, legendary cloak, lots of things, and you must do this on every character. But fortunately, there are a few skips. But if
Mm-hmm.
you are playing casually, I would just you might just spend the whole night doing this, or if you don't have much time to play, just be aware that you will need to be questing for a period of time before you can do all the interesting max level content. And you already need to have essences and the initial part of the Nazjatar quest line done, because this quest line will give you some essences along the way.
Yeah, I
So
took my time. I was doing it slowly. I was exploring everything. I spent 5-6 hours probably flying around everywhere, traveling, exploring in both of the new versions of the Oldham and the Vale as well, finding rares, trying to kill as many as possible. Didn't manage to kill them all in the first day, but and just time to go back now every day to make sure I get all of them.
yeah, if you're someone that's interested in the story, definitely check out the quest text, because you will find yourself going to a lot of places that were not relevant for several expansions.
Yep.
So, for example, you will go to a Vale of Eternal Blossoms and you'll be like, wow, the Vale is restored. Like, why am I meeting up with Rodden? He wasn't around until Mr. Pandaria, and maybe you didn't even play in Mr. Pandaria. So
Yep.
just read the quest text to have the story make more sense. It definitely ties together a lot of story threads around the world. Like, you go to Blackwing Descent from Cataclysm, Oldham from Cataclysm, Vale from Mop. Rodden was a boss in Mop, so it takes you to lots of different places. But if you don't care about the lore, let's discuss some of the content that this quest line unlocks if you just want to race through and get your new legendary and do all the cool max level stuff. So there is this legendary cloak that has a name you can't really pronounce.
Of course.
Yeah, the Azure Chromis, the Shroud of Resolve. It's a throwback to Wrothian, giving us legendary cloak in Mop, and you need to power up this cloak to gain resistance when you go into the horrific visions. You get more stats as you power it up, and you also get interesting use effects that can increase your primary stats or reduce a corruption effect, which ties into the new fun corruption system. Is there anything about the legendary cloak you want to mention? I feel like if you have the cloak, it's pretty straightforward. Like, you either have it or you don't have it.
Yeah,
but
I think you pretty much covered it already. Even if you're not interested in lore, the whole introductory quest line is very important, because it's the way for you to unlock this cloak. It's to both be able to go through this new thing called Horrific Visions, which we'll go through in just a moment, but it's also very useful because of the new corruption system, as Perk mentioned, because you will start having gear with corruption on them, and having a properly upgraded cloak means that you can resist more of this corruption, meaning that you can wear more corruption pieces without having to deal with the negatives so much. So definitely want to get one of those cloaks for all of your characters, really. It's the item level is also a lot higher than what we've seen so far. It's 470, I believe, that it starts with, and then it gets upgraded, so the item level also increases with that. So yeah, definitely get that cloak on every character that you intend on playing this patch. Like Perk said, there's also going to be some skips, mainly the different scenarios. You can talk to an NPC at the different places, so you won't have to do like the raid/dungeons scenarios repeatedly over all the different alts. You can skip those by saying something like, I've done this before, or something, or I've seen this before. There's like a speaking option that you can click for it.
Yep. Also, before we get to Horrific Visions, we should probably touch on the corruption system, because I know it's scaring a lot of people.
Yes.
We discussed this on the show a lot. We discovered a lot of the corruption mechanics on the PTR. Blizzard didn't really get into too many PTR previews, because I guess they wanted people to see how intuitive it was on their own. But basically, corruption is a 8.3 only system that is only around for the patch, that has special mechanics that represent the flavor of the old gods, and it replaces Titan Forging on all the patch-specific items, like the raid items. Basically, the idea is that you can have these interesting benefits on items, but they also come with drawbacks. So more elaborate versions of what we saw in Crucible of Storms, where some of the items had interesting use effects but also had drawbacks. They've really made it more elaborate by putting base corruption on certain items. So, and if you have a base amount of corruption that's too high, your character starts having all these horrible effects that can have, like, you take damage, or there's AoE puddles, and it starts getting pretty bad. And some of the weapons even have like baseline really high amounts of corruption, so you might not even be able to equip them at the start because it's too detrimental. So you need to build up your resistance to corruption through the cloak and other means.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a whole. If you don't like an item, if you're scared of corruption, you can cleanse the item and just make it boring. But I
Make
think
it normal.
if this goes well, Blizzard, I believe, wants to continue using something like the system in Shadowlands where corruption itself won't continue, but there would be themed gear around each patch.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
it
one
feels
thing.
like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the. Go ahead.
No, you go
It's a
ahead.
lot of the yeah. I was gonna say a lot of the 8.3 things feel like they are testing systems for
Yes.
Shadowlands in
Mm-hmm.
small ways. So you have corruption, and then you also have horrific visions having parallels with Torghast, the like infinitely replayable content. Okay, I'm done. You can say your
Yeah, I feel like the corruption system, obviously, I don't know how it's going to play out yet. I do think it will be better than Titan Forging and War Forging, but we'll see. But what makes it also extra interesting is because of its ties to what the current content is. So it makes it a lot more fitting. Like you guys who have played already, you might see when you're walking around, you look corrupted. Like you have these sort of blue purpley effects on you, on your gear, and it feels cool. It feels like you are representing what is going on right now in the game. And yeah, the corruption system will only be here for 8.3, but parts of it may be used in a maybe similar or very different system in Shadowlands, because something that we're going to talk about very, very soon is this Millennium interview. And in there, I believe Ian even confirms that Warforging, Titan Forging, etc. will for sure not come back in Shadowlands, and that statement on its own made me really, really happy, because I'm more happy to try out new systems than continue with the Titan Forging one, because I definitely was not a big fan of it.
Yeah, and maybe it fit in Mist of Pandaria, but it's showing its age, and we've moved beyond that. And when it first started in Mist, it was just like +6 item levels on heroic and mythic raid gear.
And you could farm it too, because you could get the items to upgrade, so it wasn't so bad. Yeah.
So that's the corruption system. One more quick note. We've made separate gear pages on corruption, covering every like recommendations for all specs, like what gear you should shoot for, what's a sweet corruption spot, what are certain traits that are good to look for, and all those guides are live along with blood mallet charts. So all that's good. And yeah, let's talk about horrific visions a little bit, the sort of precursor to Torghast in Shadowlands.
Yeah.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Take it away.
You go ahead.
Okay. All right. So basically, they're alternate reality versions of Stormwind and Ankamar. If N'Zoth were to be successful, you can kind of see a little bit of this in the intro cinematic, which we'll talk about soon.
They look so cool.
Yeah, they look really cool, and it has really cool stuff if you see things like, Thrall is corrupted, Alaria is corrupted, everything is all purpley. There's lots of rewards you can get, like a backpack, transmoggable backpack, mounts, higher ranks of essences, a weapon illusion. And you want to run these to upgrade your legendary cloak, as well as get some gear from the chests, even though it might be a little buggy this week as to how frequently you get gear from the chests at the end. You can run this by yourself or with up to 5 people. Blizzard is billing this as the equivalent to the Mage Tower. I don't think it's exactly like the Mage Tower, because it's not a spec-specific challenge, and there's not something for every spec, plus you can do something in a group. But it's the equivalent of what they're saying, like the small, replayable, small challenge content.
That you progress over time, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the limiting mechanic is that you only have a certain amount of... Your sanity decreases over time, and there are areas that are easier or more challenging to do. So you need to gain more resistance and get better at the map before you can venture into the more challenging areas and clear more of the horrific vision over time.
So
and
over
there
time,
are things called faceless masks, which make it even more difficult. And if you complete the run solo using these masks, you will get a special feat of strength, which I guess is the equivalent of the Mage Tower, how that's the thing you need to do before the patch. That's the most challenging thing, and you get mark of prestige for that.
I did notice that there was an achievement for doing something in Horrific Vision solo, which, yeah, I guess was this thing to do with masks. Do we know much about these masks? Because I completely missed that.
Sure. Let me grab this from the guide. So the masks. We have many Horrific Visions guides. So basically, each area has a unique mask, and you can pick it up, and you gain more corrupted mementos. But the mobs have more health and deal more damage. And each mask has a detrimental effect, like your maximum sanity is reduced by 50%.
Wow.
If you have less than 50% sanity, an enemy will spawn and attack you. And to make it even more difficult, you must do certain things to unlock other masks. So to unlock the first basic mask, the Mask of the Long Night, you must complete all 5 objectives in one Horrific Vision.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question. Yeah. How do you get these masks? Okay, so the first one is to complete all of the bosses, basically.
Right. Okay. And then the other ones are when you're wearing a mask active, you must complete a certain objective. So the Burn Bridge is Valley of Wisdom, while the Daredevil is Valley of Honor, etc.
Gotcha. Well, that's cool. That is cool.
Yep.
But for our first experience, I think it can be very overwhelming.
You won't be doing that.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about masks at all. I was just asking because I was curious. Yeah. When I was doing this on stream, I kind of went in blind, and it was very complicated. I was like, what is going on? How many Horrific Visions am I doing this week? And what does it cost? Does it cost me? Does it cost the entire group? And we could try to give a little summary of it all. We have this new currency that we are able to loot or earn from doing different things in both Uldum and Veil of Eternal Blossoms. You can also find them in chests that you loot and rares that you kill. And this whole introductory quest gives you a lot of this currency, which means that even if you don't specifically farm for more rares and more chests, you will probably have enough to buy the specific item that you need in order to unlock or start a Horrific Vision by just spending those currencies. I'm not sure if that sentence was right. But basically,
the names of these are the Coalescing Vision, and then you buy the Vessel of Horrific Visions.
Yes, the Vessel is the one that you pay as a way to sort of unlock the scenario so you can start it. English school, by the way, So you have that, you go in, and if you are in a group, you cannot start one unless everyone has a vessel each. So if you're in a group, you're all paying, and you go in together, basically. You all pay, and you're in this together. Mobs will scale accordingly, and then you all get your own personal loot in the end. The first thing that you want to think about in the first week, if it's your first couple runs especially, is in order to earn the item that will upgrade your cloak, you need to make sure you defeat Thrall. In my first run, I did not do that. I kind of ran in.
Don't explore around.
Don't do what I did. I went in with 2 friends and kind of just felt like, okay, so if I kill Thrall, the Horrific Vision is over. That's not very fun. So I went to the side and kept pulling and never reset my sanity, and then I died to some mechanics of a little boss guy. You don't want to do that. In your first runs, what you want to do, probably to keep safe or to be safe, is go for Thrall. You can kill some smaller mobs on the side, but I would recommend at least for your first 1 or 2 runs to get Thrall so you can get your cloak upgrades, which will make your runs afterwards a little bit easier because it helps your resistance, and it also allows you to spend some of the currency to actually put points into the tree, which is another topic. I feel like there's so many different topics for this. Yes.
when you put the points into the tree, you gain abilities that make the Horrific Vision easier. And when you have all tiers of the tree unlocked, you can buy more items from Wrathion related to essences, as well as that backpack and some other items.
So
So
going
it's like
for the quick
systems
finish.
within systems. Yeah, systems
Exactly.
within systems.
Exactly. So you want to kill some random mobs and you want to kill Thrall. That way you have your legendary cloak being upgraded. It makes you a bit more resistant. And also it means between the runs you can go ahead and upgrade, use those systems, the tree, which looks very similar to the systems that we've had previously, like the one in the class hall and the one that we currently have on the boat as well.
Yep.
Wait, it's not a boat in Horde. What do you call the current one? What is it for? It's like mostly based on war fronts.
War resources.
That's
yeah,
it.
the
war resources. That's it. So yeah, it's one of those systems again. So you'll probably find it very familiar. You make a choice, left or right, and in this system, the talents that you can pick are either based on you soloing the content or based on you doing it as a group. You can make that decision from the beginning. You can also read some guides on it if you want to see what are the good and the bad, the pros and the cons of going solo or in a group, because both things can be good and bad for different things. Like one of the main pros I'd say with going in a group is if one person dies, the other person can res them, which is quite nice.
Right. And you have people that can handle different mechanics and roles, as opposed to, maybe your class isn't ideal for soloing horrific visions. Like maybe if you're a DPS, it's fine, but if you're a healer, it's not so great. And a healer, it's best to party up with some DPS.
And if you are going to group up as a group of 2, maybe going for solo talents actually isn't that bad. So you can go ahead and just read through different talents and see what suits you better. Pretty much. And if you're unsure, of course, there's guides to look at and read through to see what other people have got to say about it. Always nice to be inspired by what other people say. Not that you have to do exactly what people say either. At the end of the day, it's your choice.
Yeah. This also reminds me a bit, talking about Torghast, also the Chromie scenario from Legion, how that also had a component where you weren't meant to clear it at first, but then you could put points into this type of
upgrade
talent
system.
tree, and then it became easier. And then you could do tricks to do speed runs and get things even faster. So it's interesting to see that type of system evolve. I think the feedback I've seen so far is that people want to do more runs of this than in the past, past content. Like people just want to be able to do more runs per week. They find this part of the patch fun. So maybe that bodes well for Torghast and similar content in Shadowlands.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually really excited about this content. At first, I was a bit skeptical, especially because it was compared to Mage Towers. So I was a bit like, no, that's not a Mage Tower. No, it sounds really bad. Wait, you're going to go in as a group? No, not fun at all. Right. But now I tried it myself. I did a couple of runs in a group and did a couple of runs on my own as well. And it's fun, honestly. And the feeling of doing more each time and, especially after my first run that was a failure where I didn't get an upgrade for my cloak. I took things a lot slower, made sure I maxed my sanity before fighting bigger mobs and things like that. It's fun because then for each time you take a little bit more risk, right? You remember that you made it this far before, so maybe this time you can go a bit further. I do recommend kind of doing it alone or maybe with one friend. I feel like it's probably a much more fun experience than doing it as a 5. I feel like as a 5 you probably missed a lot of the experience and people are doing things for you. But whatever you prefer.
Well, I mean, you have a limited amount of tries because you're limited by the amount of coalescing visions you can get. So if you're concerned you're going to mess it up, and you are concerned that you're not going to get those upgrades you need, maybe do it in a bigger group. And then once you feel at a comfortable level, you can try doing it with fewer friends or even solo.
Yeah, definitely. If you feel more comfortable, you could go with a friend or 2 or a whole group, even if that's more safe feeling. And also, if you are worried, we would recommend to just go for Thrall, because if you go for Thrall, at least you'll get that cloak upgrade so that your next one will be a little bit easier.
Yep, and then if you get enough upgrades, you will be able to
pulling cables.
Yes, you will have a corrupted cat. If you have enough, if you keep upgrading the cloak, it doesn't just help with sanity, it helps with the amount of corruption resistance you have.
Mm-hmm.
So, you could stick on a weapon that has 50 corruption, and eventually that might not totally kill you. Right,
Yep.
Paul, stop typing
Yep.
in chat.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And it's also
so,
higher item level, so you're getting more stats too. They're like
yeah,
everything
and
is a
then
positive.
at one level, you gain something that makes you immune to corruption effects. So you could, in theory, be using, have a risky amount of corruption, and then you put this cloak on, and you use the cloak to neutralize a bad effect,
Mm-hmm.
which then helps your party. And then at a really high level, your cloak has an interesting proc as well, which is just like a DPS, throughput increase as well.
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
if you do happen to fail, you don't need to worry too much. Right now, you can pretty much upgrade your cloak all the way up to, is it rank 5 or rank 6?
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so
So,
right now you might feel like, oh no, now I'm a little bit behind, but it's not a problem because next week when they start having a cap of how much you can upgrade per week. I don't remember at
mhm.
what rank that starts. I think it's at rank 6. At that point, it's kind of like a time gate thing to help people catch up. So if you do, let's say, 4 visions this week and maybe 3 visions next week, even if you fail like half of them, you can still reach rank 3 or rank 4 by next week. And next week, people are only doing 1 rank, so you're catching up with them. It's not that big of a deal. But
Yeah,
it's
and this was something that wasn't on the PTR, and it was announced at the last minute, which I
mhm.
think was a good I think that was a good update Blizzard made, because a lot of people were concerned that you could blow a horrific vision and then you would always be behind people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So week
Imagine failing
one,
the first one and then be behind forever.
so week one, your cloak is capped at rank 6, and you need to do 6 horrific vision then during the first week. You get 3 runs from the intro quest line, enough currency for 1 during the major assault, minor assaults, and then you're doing your lesser vision every day.
Hmm.
Week 2, you can go up to rank 7. Week 3 is capped at rank 8. And then as of March 17th, the max rank will be 15.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of gatekeeping there to make sure
Yeah.
that those of us who happen to fail 1 or 2 or 3 or all at least
Yeah.
have a little bit
Yeah.
of time to catch up with people before they go way too far ahead. I see in the chat here that Noble says that he failed 3 of them this week. Feels bad, man. It's okay,
Aw.
Noble.
Yeah.
There's going to be limits of how much people can get ahead of us, so we'll catch up. It's okay.
Right. And to upgrade it up to rank 8, you only need to do 1 run per level. So you'll be able to catch up quickly if you can do several runs per week, but you only need 1 to upgrade each rank. Now when you get to the higher
Mm-hmm.
levels, you need to do like 2 runs to upgrade it from 9 to 10, 3 runs to 11, but
Mm-hmm.
those are higher ranks at that point, so
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense that they take more time.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there's so many different things to say. I hope it wasn't too confusing with all of the information. But yeah, horrific visions are honestly a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing them solo. They can be done in a group. There's many things that you're progressing, such as upgrading your cloak. You have the talent system. You have the currency system, which they're 2 different currencies, right? Or
Yeah,
because there's one
corrupted
currency for the talents.
Right. There's the corrupted mementos, which are also needed to cleanse the items. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have the coalescing
Coalescing.
visions, which are needed to get into the horrific vision.
Yeah, it's like you buy the vessel, which is kind of like a key in order to access the horrific vision. You need 1 key for each time you go in. And this is also the same currency, which in the end, if you end up with a lot of currency, you don't need to do horrific visions. You can spend it on, I believe, a mount, a backpack transmog, and 1 more thing.
An item to add gem sockets.
Ah, that's it. Yeah. Yep. There it is.
Yeah, Gouged Eye of N'Zoth, the Wicked Swarmer mount, the Black Dragon Scale backpack, and then rank 3 and 4 essences, as well as cleansing corrupted gear, but that's like a very small amount of corrupted mementos.
I see two
So
comments in the chat, which I feel like are very, very relevant here for a lot of people. One person says, I failed two, one because the UI bugged out, and one for being dumb and not recovering sanity on time. Being dumb and not recovering sanity on time, yeah, that was kind of like me. It happened, and I was very greedy and didn't think I needed sanity before fighting a big mob. But the first one, UI bug, which also is very similar to the second
yeah,
person who said that he got feared through the ground and DC'd. Those are really good reasons to make sure that you do these in a group, because then your partner or partners will be able to complete the horrific vision for you at least, and potentially maybe res you when when you've restarted the game,
right.
or whatever issue you have. So those are actually some of the biggest not cons, pros for going
Yeah.
as a group, because then your friends can help you.
Yeah, so if you're worried about falling behind, go in the group for some extra leeway
Mm-hmm.
and security.
Yeah, for sure. Especially things you can't help, like if you get DC'd, that's not really your fault. You can't really do anything
Right.
about it. And if you have a friend, and at least, or friends, then they could complete the horrific vision for you. So that's a good thing.
Yep.
And Bright Paws like, so
So
when are we talking about cats?
I know when we're talking about mice, that's like a cat toy for you.
True.
Yeah.
Let
So
me look at this to-do list to see if we mentioned everything.
yeah. Oh, there's also the assaults, which you unlock through
Oh yeah.
the
Mm-hmm.
introductory quest line, and they're pretty similar to past assaults. They are in Vale of Eternal Blossoms and Uldum. There are major and minor assaults with different types of rewards. They're a great source of coalescing visions. And they also have a lot of rares that spawn that can give you mounts, pets, toys. Also, there are pet battles up each day. The pet battles give you reputation with the new factions, and you want to care about the new factions because they are tied to essences as well as a new augment rune.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you want to earn rep with the two new factions, you want to be doing the assaults, as well as using the assaults as a great way to get the currency you need to enter the horrific vision, as well as the lesser visions, which are like baby versions of horrific visions.
Yep.
So good practice there, and also a good source of currency to enter them.
Mm-hmm.
The zones look very corrupted and cool. I know that there are no new zones in patch 8.3, but having these zones look corrupted, I guess, is Blizzard's answer to having, a zone that looks kind of different. The Veil is fully restored, so that's kind of nice if you were sad it, got blown up in patch 5.4.
Yeah.
And we are doing today in WoW series on the front page, like we did for Najatar, highlighting the daily quests and events and the pet battles that are up if you need help,
Oh,
getting that done, because not everything's on the map
Bright Paw.
in Bright Paw.
So cute. Um, yeah, as usual, Wowhead do have guides which are awesome for looking at if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed. Like there is this quick summary that I found as well, which mentions the intro quest, the essences that have now been reduced in costs, which you might want to go for, the Mechagon Najatar ones, allied races, as we mentioned, Death Knights that you can create if you've pre-purchased Shadowlands, Worgen and Goblins, which have their new heritage armor, and this one is an interesting one. We didn't mention it. I'm not sure if it's in the notes anywhere, but the doubloon system for
Oh
island
yeah,
expeditions. That's an
yeah,
interesting.
it's fairly specific. We can go over it though. You can
With the
spend
mount section.
doubloons
Mm-hmm.
on crates, and then for that, let's talk about in the mount section.
Yeah, we'll do it in the mount section.
Add it there, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just saw it in this thing here. And then the last topic mentioned here on this quick to-do list on the first day of the patch is the mentioning of the new transmog rules, which we will mention as well. Yeah, what else did we want to mention that is general about the patch?
I mean, well, it's good that you mentioned the heritage armor. It's not just Worgen. Sorry, it's not just Vulpera and Mechanome.
Mm-hmm.
They added a quest line for Worgen and Goblin,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people thought that would be added back in 8.2.5 when the model updates came about, but it's actually now.
Mm-hmm.
And they have some interesting details on them. Like Worgen can have a pant or skirt option,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
while the goblin can have their goggles above their head or over their eyes.
Yep.
And the goblin set has sort of like a Wowhead rocket off one shoulder, which is
Yeah,
cool.
I remember. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, why don't we talk a bit about this interview saying there's no patch 835? We've gone over all the major systems. Do we think this is enough, or were you surprised there wasn't an 835 coming?
I felt surprised because of mainly because Shadowlands felt so far from its final product at BlizzCon, and it felt to me like it means that it's going to be finished at a lot later date than BFA
Mm-hmm.
was. I was expecting a launch around, September, October, like maybe end of October, maybe even early November. But if there's no 835 patch, what does that mean? That the expansion must be coming a lot sooner? How long can we be in this patch? What are your thoughts about it?
So I was surprised because story wise, we don't really have much. I mean, we have that long introductory quest, but we don't really have. We're still at like Old Gods, and then we have to get to Shadowlands and Sylvanas, and they seem very far
Yeah,
apart
that's
right
actually
now.
true. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I thought there would be a 835 similar to 735 that would have kind of, end of BFA cinematics that, like in 735 they were celebrating the end of the Legion, and then the leaders discover Azerite, kind of a transition patch. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought we would be getting some of that,
Mm-hmm.
because story wise it just there's this very big gap right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. I think that while the systems added have some good replayability, like horrific visions, um, it seems I agree with you that Shadowlands seems far off. The release date was given at the end of 2020, which usually means that it's launching in quarter four. And they don't usually say launching by December if it's launching in June, but who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe they're going to surprise us.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the one thing I can think of is that maybe they would have an update, but instead of calling it 835, they would call it the pre-patch for Shadowlands, which would be good PR, and it would be an extended pre-patch. So you would have a
Mm-hmm.
long time to adjust to the level squish and new leveling system, and there would be an extended like Wrath-esque Death Knight invasion event,
Mm-hmm.
and they would have that going on for a few months as opposed to an 835 for a few months. That's the only thing I can think of.
I guess that would make sense because, yeah, like you mentioned, there's not. I mean, especially with the lore things too, because we're going from old gods and corrupted and everything to kind of back to Sylvanas and going to Northrend, and it feels kind of like splitting stories. It's what also in a way felt kind of sad about the whole old gods thing suddenly being like forgotten, because now we're like, oh, we're going to
Yeah.
Shadowlands now. So how is that transition going to be done properly to feel like both things are important, and how will the new system also work with all the new levels? I think you're absolutely right. This is the first time ever that we have a new leveling system. So having
Mm-hmm.
a longer pre-patch actually makes a lot of sense for people to get used to it, and for people to try it, for people to go over their alts and, experience every single expansion. I think it does make sense to have a big pre-patch, and that is probably the reason why there is no 835. I guess it would be called the 9.0, and then that in itself would then just last forever.
Right. I do feel bad that the old gods aren't being explored super much. I mean,
I
N'Zoth is the
agree.
big bad of the
Yeah.
expansion, but I felt a lot of the buildup was focusing on the faction conflict, and we almost had like two expansion storylines running in parallel.
Mm-hmm.
And while I get that the old gods working behind the scenes to, like corrupt Azeroth, makes sense stylistically, I do think that having them be in the forefront more and examining their corruption would be more exciting, especially for people that are kind of tired of the faction conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Because it felt like the faction conflict sort of reached its climax with Sourfang in 825, and now it's like, okay, now that story is finally out of the way. Here's a patch, one patch, just on the old gods,
Yeah, it
and
feels
I
kind
think it
of
needed
rushed.
more.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
completely. I agree.
Because if you compare it to Argus, I know systems are different, but Argus did have the three related new zones. One looking very legiony and fell. The other that had the raid, and the third having the Draenei influences as well. And a lot of people just like going to new zones, even though I think the corrupted zones look cool. People just like the idea that they're going to a new continent or something big like that.
Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of okay that they may have saved some resources on
Right.
corrupting places that existed rather than making new ones. But then I think you're right. I think there should have been a secondary patch which was even more to do with the corruption and the old gods, because we kind of just got away from the conflict, from the faction conflict, and it feels like, oh, faction conflict was huge. Oh, we have this old god thing to take care of. Okay, nice, it's over. Now let's go on. Um, it
Yeah.
feels a bit rushed, especially
Yeah, I
because
don't.
old god expansion is something that people have been looking forward to for a long time, and maybe this is some kind of build up for an old god expansion in,
Mhm.
like, the expansion after Shadowlands. But there's still something about it feels a little bit like a naked bone.
Yeah, I mean, like, we have Zalatath missing in action. Ashara is missing in action. The Dragonflies just got back together. We're not exactly sure what N'Zoth did or didn't do. I know some of the interviews, including the one we're talking about, I believe hinted at the Void Lords returning in the future. So maybe they want to do something bigger with the old gods in the expansion after Shadowlands, whenever
Mm-hmm.
they address the Void Lords in more detail. But it feels like we wrapped up one story and now we're looking at another story, while usually with expansions we know where we are going pretty much from the start, and the final boss ties a lot of the stories together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even in Warlords, which seem truncated, we started with Garrosh and the Iron Horde, and we followed the rise and fall of the Iron Horde and how Hellfire Citadel ended up corrupted under Gul'dan. And
Mm-hmm.
we saw it was like a complete story arc from start to finish, while in BFA we sort of started with the Kultiras and Zandalari fighting against each other, and now we're killing N'Zoth, and it's like, okay, well, like, Talanji sort of just vanished.
Yeah, like what even
After
happened with
the expansion.
Talanji? Yeah.
Yeah. So it just feels like there's a lot of loose ends. Maybe that's good for future expansions, but I think it would be satisfying if BFA could operate as a unit as well. Or maybe they were just like, okay, BFA just didn't work in its current form. Let's have the old god patch to set up stories for future, less experimental, more traditional expansions. I don't know, but I wish there was more of the
I
old
mean, the
gods because they're
expansion
really
name,
cool.
the expansion name doesn't mention old gods. It does
Right.
basically put the focus on Horde versus Alliance. So maybe this
Right.
was the intention all along. Maybe we're just supposed to get a little taste of it, and then have the old god expansion later on, which is a lot more
Right.
um, at the front of everything, rather than a story that's kind of going behind the scenes, and then
Yeah.
a quick face to face in the final raid. Maybe there is some more background work to it. Maybe they didn't want to waste too much old god things into an expansion, which later on will just be referred to as BFA and not really the old
Right.
god expansion. So maybe in a way that does make sense, that we did have so much emphasis on Sylvanas and Sarfang
Hmm.
and the faction conflict in general. Speaking of faction conflict, we never really got any word on any kind of loosening of factions for next expansion, did we?
No, no, they even went against that in at the Q&A.
Okay.
How they were like, someone asked about that. They're like, oh, now that we're kind of in peace, are we
Oh
doing
yeah,
this?
I
And
remember.
Blizzard was like, actually, yeah, it thematically makes sense, but that's an iconic part of the game that we don't want to mess with right now.
Mm-hmm.
We'd rather make it easier for you to find groups within your faction. I wouldn't totally rule that out though, because I remember a few BlizzCons ago, they're like, "Oh, Death Knight allied races, no, we're not doing that at the current time." And now it was set up for this big, payoff in Shadowlands, where the Allied races can become the Death Knights. So who knows? Maybe we'll resurrect some heroes in Shadowlands, and then the faction conflict will start up again with these Warcraft 2 and 3 heroes bickering at each other, and then we'll go through it again, and then we'll have the factions dissolved after the older generation of ghosts gets all their faction tension out.
Because it was interesting, if you look at the character selection page that you guys have, they did update that list as well, where now you can see the symbol of the faction that you are. And that's interesting because maybe that's a little bit of a hint that later on you might see human and human, but maybe it's not entirely sure that it's alliance, so they put a big alliance like logo there. I mean, maybe it's not at all, maybe it's just a random conspiracy theory, but like that is a possibility of something that could be used in the future to differentiate the different factions if the race itself doesn't.
Another you mentioned you want to talk about this before, and I confirmed it is in the interview, the whole corruption and Titan forging thing. Ian said, we've wanted to move away from war forging and Titan forging for a while. We've heard a lot of player feedback in the last couple of years, and we agree with a lot of it about the feeling of randomness and the way that it can undermine the value of item level. We're going to learn a lot from how this plays out in terms of a world without Warforging and Titan Forging, and I can say that those systems won't be returning as players are accustomed to them in the Shadowlands. So I don't know if that means that on like the boring items it will continue, but it seems that for the patch relevant important items, they are not going to use the Warforged Titan Forging system.
Yeah, they're not going to use the Warforged Titan Forge straight up, but they might use something like the way that we have corruption now. So we're not sure what kind of system that'll be, but at least it means that it's going to be something different, which feels good because I feel like a lot of the Warforging and Titan Forging systems has made it feel like items don't really feel good when they drop unless they are Titan Forged. So this way you can actually be happy when you get a piece of item, hopefully. We'll see how corruption plays out. You can actually be happy when an item drops because then you can use it. I think something else that was also mentioned in the interview somewhere on commenting this is the difference between corruption and Titan Forging, which I agree does make it straight up better, is that with corruption items, there's a limit of how many corruption items you can use.
So Millennium asked, aren't you afraid that corrupted gear could be even more RNG than Warforged and Titan Forged items? And Ian said, there is effectively a limit on how many corrupted pieces you can wear because of the nature of the corruption stat.
Yes.
Unlike Warforging and Titan Forging, where it affected ultimately every single piece of gear you were wearing except for Azerite armor, we'd like to get back to a place where you kill a mythic raid boss and you get a piece of mythic raid gear. You can feel confident that it is as good as that piece could be in terms of the raw power. You'll see many more corruption items than you can use, which gives you the ability to choose which combination you want to wear at a given time.
Exactly. I like that. I think that alone does make corruption a better system, because that means if you do get, for example, that mythic piece of item, it means, well, okay, I have these gloves that are best in slot. They're not corrupted, but it's okay because at least they are the best in the game as it is, just the power itself. And then I can go for my 3 or 4 pieces of corruption in other slots. So if you compare it to the Titan Forge,
the item level of it, you can always cleanse it or keep it in your bags for a later time.
Yeah, that too. If it does happen to have corruption, but you're not able to use it for whatever reason, then you could cleanse it. Or you keep the corruption on that piece of item and cleanse other pieces of items. So you can decide how you want to do it. Imagine a Titan Forged system where you're only allowed, let's say, 3 Titan Forged pieces.
Yeah.
That makes it a lot more strivable. Like if I have 3 slots where I can decide for it to be max Titan Forged and I can't have any other Titan Forged pieces, I think that makes it a lot more feasible as a goal to try to strive for. Whereas at the moment, no one is best in slot geared because you need Titan Forged in every slot and also a socket on top of that. And speaking of sockets, now with this new horrific vision, as you get oh, so cute, as you get this these currencies, you can actually buy a socket to also put on your items instead of it just being a random chance as you get the item. It feels like a better system. I mean, we'll see how it plays out, but at the moment, it does feel good.
Yeah, and I'm glad that Blizzard is trying something new instead of just saying that they always want to keep updating the system but not actually doing it. And I think that now is a good time to try it out in the final patch before the expansion. So if there is a problem with it, they can adjust it during the beta, as opposed to, you know, trying something new, having it go wrong, falling flat on their face at the start of the expansion. Like, imagine if Azerite had gotten some, you know, testing and player feedback in 7.3, it would have been an early warning sign that it had to have been updated more. Being able to try out that system in advance.
I'm also really surprised that they said that they've been wanting to go away from Warforging and Titan Forging for a while, because from what I remember in every one of those Q&A shows that they had on the Warcraft Twitch channel, they always said that they're happy with the Titan Forge system. And I remember the chat and everyone being so mad at that. They're like, no, it's a good system, and it works because it makes people more happy to do raids again.
Yeah, you don't know if there's PR reasons. Like, maybe they weren't super happy, but if they said that they were trying to come up with a change for it and it was taking a while, then people would be impatient or say that, like, Blizzard forgot about them or Blizzard changed their minds.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's probably to not put too much pressure on themselves having to have a new system soon. But because of that, I had no expectation for it to ever go away. Or not ever, but not going away in this expansion at least. And now it did, so that's cool. I'm happy about the new system.
So, was there anything else from the interview you wanted to discuss? I'm saving some of the lore-related things because I think that ties in with our guest next week. Hint. But if we hit the major interview stuff, I think we should take a look at the new surprise cinematic that came out.
Yeah, I think cinematic is good to go with. I think the topics that interested me the most were the topics of Titan Forging and Warforging.
Yeah, the other topics were things that we sort of already knew, or maybe were geared towards people that had taken a break from the patch, or like I said before, like the lore Void Lord things, which I think would be fun to discuss next week, especially after we see the, Nyalotha cinematic.
Yes. Well, I have the cinematic ready, so we could play it. Yeah. Maybe there's some people here who haven't seen it yet. It is live in-game, so it's not a spoiler. Let's play it up.
Yeah.
You mean to tell me none of your spies have returned? N'Zoth is out there, and we need answers now!
We are doing all we can. Speaker Magni is coming, along with a new advisor. He claims to have information for us.
By the light, a new advisor. Wrothian.
Anduin, it's been so long.
Oh, dragons.
I suppose I deserved that.
Oh, you deserve more than that. My father is dead because of you!
And my father is dead because of the old gods.
Lad, he's come to help us.
Nefarian the Earthwarder was once the protector of Azeroth. But N'Zoth turned a noble mind to madness, and now my father is only remembered as Deathwing. And, as I haven't the least desire to share that fate, I've been studying how to avoid it.
Just tell me how to prepare for this attack. Our armies
will be useless. N'Zoth will strike here. He'll manipulate emotions, get people to act in ways contrary to their nature. You won't be able to trust your senses, your memories, your friends. After all, what is real if our perceptions cannot be trusted? Anduin! Don't you see, old friend? It's already begun.
Very well, advisor. Tell us how to stop him.
Yeah. Cinematic. I feel like
So
yeah.
So I was gonna say that the sort of on a meta level, the thing that was funny to me was seeing everyone's reactions to Wrothian, because we data mined his model back in, I want to say, August. So to me, like, I had the, oh my god, new model, so exciting back then.
I
But
felt the
we haven't
same.
actually
Yeah.
seen him. So it was like, oh my god, Wrothian looks so different. I'm like, really? Like, it's been this way for a long time.
And
But
yeah. It's like,
You
oh
know,
my
he
god,
looks-
Wrothian looks so good. Like, and I'm like, yeah, I guess so. I kind of had that reaction a few months ago, but yeah, you're right.
yeah. As a side note though, I just on a technical level, I'm really excited they have a character with actual curly hair for a change. Because normally it's all straight hair, and I wonder if this is like the backpack tech where we see something on Recruit a Friend and then it's everywhere. And remember with the Shadowlands preview, we saw finally the humans with the curly hair. So you have to wonder if this is a test of their curly hair tech for character customization, because you really can't get curly hair in WoW. Pretty realistic, and he has the best version so far with like highlights and layers to them. So I was excited about the hair.
Oh, that's actually a good point, because that's something else that we will see in the pre-patch, right? All the new models. There's, for people who may not know, there's been talk and some teasers as well at BlizzCon of pictures of human faces that look very, very different from what we see at the moment. I feel like at the moment we kind of have like a face
It's
that
kind of disappointing.
yeah, it's like one and the same face that just looks older and older, or angrier. Whereas in Shadowlands, what we'll be able to do is change actual face shapes. Like you can have a face that looks more Asian, for example, and then you can have, like you mentioned, like probably more differences in hairs as well. So maybe very curly hair, for example. So I'm actually really excited for that. That's gonna be really cool to be able to make so many different looks, to maybe make it look like yourself, maybe look like somebody who you like, maybe look like, I don't know, like anyone. So I think that's it's been a long time coming in a way, but the game is very old, and I guess we haven't seen many updates in those ways. So it's nice to see that it's finally happening, because I think something that we see in a lot of other games, other RPGs, is a lot of customization to their faces and hair and all other sorts of things. So it's nice that we're finally getting that in WoW as well.
Yeah. So on to the plot of the cinematic. We have Anduin kind of growing a backbone, and he seems annoyed with his advisors for not doing anything, kind of cranky and fed up. And then he punches Wrothian.
Yes.
And for those of you who maybe missed some of the story exposition, Wrothian was kind of indirectly responsible for the death of Varian, because Wrothian in war crimes freed Garrosh from the trial, which then led to Warlords of Draenor, which then led to the rise of Gul'dan coming to the main timeline and bringing back the Burning Legion, which is how Varian died. So that leads to the question, does it make sense that Anduin did he do these things out of his free will, or was he acting under the influence of the old gods? Because we later see in the cinematic that Anduin could picture Stormwind being corrupt. So are you on the side that he's acting under the influence of the old gods, or he's had a really shitty time, he's gonna be annoyed with some people?
I mean, I feel like I can imagine that kind of frustration can happen, and I think it's understandable considering everything that's going on. But it is interesting that in the end we see him seeing all these corrupted things, and he was also kind of looking at his hand almost surprised, or maybe not surprised being the right word, but he was looking at his hand wondering about what Wrothian was saying about this corruption taking over people's minds. So I can kind of see it both ways. What do you think, since you're a bit more, knowledgeable in the lore areas? What do you think about this? What's your take on it?
Well, I think that
Bright Paw, so cute. Yeah.
there's a cat who is now not messing with the camera.
She's like, I can punch too, and I don't need to be corrupted for it.
So when I first saw this, I was fully on the side that this was sort of character development for Anduin, because he's always been a fat pacifist, but we've seen him trying to struggle with trying to be more assertive. So, before the storm, he finally realizes that he needs to wage war against Sylvanas, or that, it ends with when he thinks that she's beyond hope. And then there's another comic where Anduin is feeling weak as a leader, and he's reading a letter from his father, and then he finally sort of, tries to be a leader that rules justly, but is, not being a pushover. So I feel like this stuff can tie into Anduin trying to be a kind leader, but not being a pushover, like this cat.
So you feel like it could be his character?
Yeah, I feel like, he's just fought a war. He's, they've lost a lot of casualties, and Sylvanas has escaped. Tyrande is upset with him. I feel that he is frustrated, and it would be weird if he was not frustrated with things. And he's shown a lot of inner turmoil before. And yeah, with Wrathian, there was this very dramatic exchange in the novel War Crimes where Anduin is begging Wrathian not to free Garrosh, and Wrathian is like, no, I need to, and then in the future we have to face a threat together. And Anduin's very young, and I can see why he blamed Wrathian for that, and he's 18 or 19, and he lost his father. So I think in both cases Anduin is acting as a normal character impulse. But I do think it's interesting that based on the camera work, it does make you wonder if he's acting under the influence of the old gods or not. And when you mentioned the hand, that reminded me of the 735 cinematic where Anduin sees the Azerite,
and he looks,
but I think it's interesting if you think about what's going on in Anduin's head, how he's a very young, untested leader, and he might be thinking that, oh no, maybe I'm being assertive is actually me under the influence of the old gods, when it's no, Anduin, it's okay to be angry sometimes, you don't need to just be totally calm. You don't need to just so I feel that he's acting normally, but because he likes everyone to be happy and get along, he'll freak out over his, upset behavior and think that he must be corrupted, when it's just, hey, being a leader kind of sucks sometimes. You have to deal with
he did seem
people.
He did seem a bit, I don't know if shocked or upset might be the word, but he did seem a bit like, oh, am I under the influence of something else here, or what actually happened? And he looks away and sees the corruption on Stormwind. So it's it's interesting. I do feel like, considering everything that happened and considering he's young as well, then it does make sense with the sudden outburst of emotion. But I guess we'll see if there is something more, because I remember you mentioning this back when, the Azerite being introduced, that Anduin did almost seem as if he's being mind controlled just by looking at the Azerite. So maybe the Azerite has over time affected him in a way. Maybe we'll see a bit more of that.
Yeah, another interesting thing is going back to how he's reacted to his father over time, because while this does seem like a very sudden outburst, there was that special 7.2 quest line where he was grieving so much over his father and being withdrawn, and people thought he was a bad leader, and he took it upon himself to sneak out of Stormwind and go to the Broken Shore and see the spot where his father died. And then there was that really touching cinematic where his father in heaven gave him the sword. So even though Anduin is trying to be stoic, he does have a lot of insecurities that he's not living up to his father, and he also misses his father a lot. So I could see how this punch was a lot of pent up emotion that he tries to hide from his people. And he could also be shocked that oh god, maybe I'm not under the corruption of the old gods, but he could also be shocked that he expressed a very intense emotion, and he tries not to be that way in front of, his advisors and other people to avoid gossip.
Mm-hmm.
Like he doesn't want to let on that he's been affected so much by the death of his father that he is.
Yep.
I do think it was a nice touch that Magni and Bane were there, especially with how Sylvanas was trying to, blackmail Bane into not interacting with Anduin at the start of BFA, and it seems that they've mended relations. If a member of the Horde Council is with the Alliance, so that seemed positive, at least. But yeah, I don't think he's under the influence of the old gods, but I think that because Anduin is self-conscious, he'll now think that any action he's taking that isn't totally harmonious is on the old gods, not him. And it's like, no, you have to, like, it's okay to be angry sometimes. That's just how life is. Which would have been fun to see things explored more in the patch, because I don't know, Anduin sort of growing a backbone while also worried about the influence of the old gods, I think is very interesting to explore, and I'd like to see more of that.
I think that's definitely the expression that he had. I think that's what he's thinking.
Yeah, especially with Sylvanas out of the picture, it would be nice to get more character growth for Anduin without her, stealing the show, doing, badass, I'm going to destroy people in a puff of smoke. It would be nice to have a time for some more subtle character development with the, remaining faction leader.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else on the cinematic, or should we discuss some of the other things? Bright pause moving my notes around.
I think that's it on the cinematic.
All right. We can discuss. Oh, as a side note, when it's sort of ambiguous about Anduin when you get to the horrific vision, because Wrothian says he doesn't want to go into the keep. So while we see things like corrupted Ilaria and corrupted Thrall, we don't actually see corrupted Anduin in the keep. I guess Wrothian really feels that if Anduin was corrupted, that he personally failed in protecting him and being a good advisor. So while we're able to see all these horrible things, Anduin being corrupted in the keep is one that he doesn't want us to see. But yeah, why don't we highlight the key art? Since we've been talking about Wrothian, we might as well show Wrothian's concept art as well as the patch key art. Quickly.
Let me get these art pieces up. Which one do you want to start with? Wrothian?
Yeah, why don't we start with him?
I think that's fitting. There we go.
So I unfortunately do not know who did this concept art, but these were all uploaded to Blizzard's press kit site. So these are official images. But yeah, obviously, if we knew who the artists were, we would share them. But these were done by Blizzard staff for patch 8.3. So yeah, I think that the concept art looks pretty close to the model. They got a lot of the jewelry in. I like how the jacket is very dynamic as well. That could bode well for armor sets in the future to have interesting silhouettes. I really like how the jacket has a cool lining, and you actually see that in the model as well. It's not just like, oh, here's a pattern on the outside and the interior is just, blue or a solid color or something boring that's not meant to be seen.
And the matching sword, and as some of you guys may know, the backpack that we can get as a transmog is also matching this design.
So did Wrothian make the backpack out of his scales, or the scales of the black dragons he killed in the past, or is this just something he made that is inspired by the black dragonflight fashion? I know, serious questions here.
Very serious question. I'm not sure. I feel like we need to get down to find out what that is actually. And is there going to be a limit of how many backpacks we can get?
Right. It's like, is this backpack made from his cousin? Or, is this an Onyxia scale or an Nefarian?
Oh,
or one
no,
of the
fake scales.
Fell off, a scale that fell off when Anduin punched him. So...
How do you get the backpack? Don't call it fake. It's not fake.
Yeah,
you get.
Be offended. It's not fake.
It's very real. You definitely don't get any back slots, but it's still real. No, it's a vendor item for the horrific vision currency. Well,
yeah, and you need to do the tech tree first and unlock that special achievement before you can buy it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So it's not the currency from horrific visions. It's the currency, the coalescing.
No, it's the mementos. It's
it
the
mementos?
corrupted mementos. Yeah.
Okay, so it is from horrific visions then. Okay.
Yeah, and other sources, but you earn more when you have one of those masks equipped that we discussed at the start of the show.
Gotcha. It's a little bit confusing that we kind of got two currencies at once, but
yeah,
there we
and
go.
a lot of things are called corrupted.
Yeah.
So we've got corruption on gear, and then the corrupted mementos.
Okay, gotcha. We have some more concept art to show off. Is there anything specific that you want to go for next?
I think the key art's important to highlight. That's big, very pink image.
Let me get
It was interesting because Blizzard didn't highlight this in their official notes, but it was on the press release kit, and it looks really cool. So I think it's worth highlighting.
Here it is. It does look really cool, actually.
So we've got N'Zoth in the background, and then we've got all of his friends in the foreground.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very pink and purple.
It is. And the orange eyes, of course. Which picture do you want to show off next?
We can highlight any of the rest. I don't really have a preference with these. I've just seen a lot of people, we can go through them quickly. I've just seen a lot of people saying they wish they were able to tame more of these bugs as hunter pets. I know some of these are mounts and pets, but I know a lot of people are like, oh, I'd love to have this icky looking bug, following me around.
The
yeah,
dragon
the
too. This
art
is a
nice.
mount, right?
Oh yeah. The void dragons are a thing because N'Zoth was working with them, and you can have one of them as your very own ahead of the curve mount, which led to some speculation that maybe dragons would play a role in Shadowlands because the head of the curve mount kind of hints at something in the next expansion. Maybe it's not the main plot, but it hints at some sort of plot tie-in. So maybe we'd, I don't know, see what happens to more cleansed void dragons in the expansion, or how the remaining dragon flights rebuild.
More bug pictures. And the concept art for N'Zoth actually looks really cool.
Yeah, I think it's also neat how it looks very similar to his Hearthstone art. Actually, I was reading on Twitter, the artist is now at Riot, and he was like, oh, I'm seeing how, N'Zoth is a big deal, and at the time I didn't realize that, so I just did his art for Hearthstone, and I didn't realize this was, going to set the stage for this WoW expansion, and now we'd see him even more detail. I would have, spent more time on him. But I think he looks very cool. He has very cheerful colors, but they look sinister, which I like pink and purple and gold seems very happy, but he just makes them look very alarming with those gigantic eyes.
Not cute at all. Very disturbing.
Yeah.
Those fangs everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always nice to look at concept
the membrane
arts.
is all stretched apart, and you're like, at the top. Yeah. So, I think we're good on the art. We should discuss the peace treaty stuff quickly, since we're talking about, Anduin. Should we play the cinematics? I know we've discussed them before. Should we just discuss what happens in them?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing, because I do have them ready, but it feels like we can give it a little TLDR and just talk about it instead.
Yeah, so TLDR, the Horde has a council. Thrall is back, but so is Bane and some other leaders, which makes sense because Blizzard's been really developing the storylines of all the Horde racial leaders. On the Alliance side, they're still all under Anduin, and Tyrande is very unhappy with the state of things because Sylvanas is still out there in the wild. So right now it seems that the Horde is a bit more harmonious, and when you kind of look back, it feels that the war chief system wasn't working for the Horde, so now they have a council, And it is kind of funny how Tyrande is this, ancient leader, and Anduin is 18, and she has to follow Anduin.
Yeah, it must
It
feel really
seems a
strange.
it feels a bit strange. You also have people, like Velen, who is also very ancient, that's now serving Anduin. So it seems that this could set maybe some seeds for more alliance discontent. Because right now it makes sense why Anduin is feeling a bit anxious and under pressure if he has all these more seasoned leaders serving him and are impatient about things. But yeah, Thrall, Bane, Lorthamar, lots of characters are back and ruling as his council, while the Alliance is kind of some people are willing to move on, while others like Tyrande are like, hey, why don't we actually discuss some government and what's up with Sylvanas and reparations for my people. So I definitely see the storyline continuing, and we already know that Tyrande is going to be continuing in Shadowlands when she tries to go get answers for herself as to why Elune felt abandoned, by her people. We learn more about that, which I think it seems, knowing what you know about Shadowlands, it seems tied to, the Arbiter and the issue of the flow of souls, and how maybe Elune's power was dampened by not having enough anima going to that realm, and we also learn that everyone that died at Teldrassil is sort of stuck in this limbo. So it definitely seems like her story will continue. Whether or not that will make the tensions between the Alliance leaders better is a different story, because it still is strange that, like I said, Tyrande and Velen and all these older characters need to serve Anduin, whether or not there's a burning of Teldrassil. Like, even the dwarves, they have this long legacy of rulers. Mora has like an infant son. She is older than Anduin, and she is, under Anduin's leadership. So I still think they have some things to iron out.
Maybe they also need a council instead.
Yeah, I think that would make more sense at this point. It doesn't seem like Anduin is a big fan of. It's like, it was his duty to become a king because there always needs to be a king of Stormwind. But I feel like if you listen to what he wanted to do, maybe he would not be interested in having, like, it's a very unsustainable position. It feels like you either die in battle or your people hate you as a war chief or former king, based on the past wars that have happened in WoW.
I also saw some questions in chat about Anduin's age, and he's currently like old teenager, I guess you could say, young adult. So probably between 18, 19, maybe 20 even, but I don't think 20. He's around those ages. I saw somebody say 12. He's not 12 anymore.
Oh no, he's way older than 12. Like, he's an adult when BFA started, so if he was 18 then he's probably like 20 now. Yeah. But, he's not like Jaina in their 30s. He's, teenager, but adult teenager.
Yeah. So old teenager, young adult.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have Great Paw trying to hit things.
And I also see somebody in the chat wondering how you see these in game. So maybe you know better for both factions. At what point?
Oh, this is just like a very small quest line that you can do. It's like one quest in game. Right, pun? No. I believe it's tied to the war campaign, or if you've done the Sourfang thing in 825, you get to sort of see the epilogue to this. But it's not a long quest line. There's also a little follow-up where you get to see Derek Proudmoore and Callia Menethil trying to meet the Forsaken and usurp the position of leadership now that Sylvanas isn't there for the Forsaken, which also ties that plot arc up as well.
Yeah, I actually haven't completed that quest line.
I mean, these aren't like Suramar length quest line, but they do tie up some plot points.
Stories.
Like, I still think we need a lot of plot points to get from Ny'alotha to Shadowlands. Yeah. But this ties up some of the faction conflict, like, who took over ruling Orgrimmar with Sourfang dead and Sylvanas escaped, who will be in charge of the Forsaken with Sylvanas gone. And they seem to have a little plot development for the Dark Rangers who were saying that they felt that they lost all hope. It's like, oh, well, that makes sense because if what was afflicting Elune affected their sense of hope as well, if they sensed that Elune couldn't protect them as much, or, oh, sorry, there's noise in the background.
It's okay.
Yeah. Hopefully this isn't... why is it making noise? Hopefully it isn't bad during the rest of the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's little quest lines that you should do, and if you can't do them, we have videos up on Wowhead's YouTube covering all of the cinematics. You can see Thrall forming the council, Enteron yelling at Anduin, and Lillian and Kalia going to Undercity together.
Brightsaw is not scared at all.
No, he ran away. Actually, I'm going to shut a door really quickly to see if that does anything.
Yeah, sure. I feel like if that was here at my place, Luna would be hiding under something. A blanket or in a box or behind a cover. I don't know. Any kind of sound outside, she freaks.
Okay, so I figured out what's going on. There's a next to a school and there is a hedge. And I looked up the window right here, and they're literally right behind my head, trimming the hedge. So it's the good news is that if they move at all, it will be less noisy because they can't be any closer to me than they are.
And they can't cut the same hedge for too long, so I'm sure they'll
hopefully
be
not. Yeah,
like one little branch at a time. No.
Exactly, they're like little clipping things.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
We could go over subs quickly, and then we could discuss some mount stuff, including a rat that Brightpaw might be interested in.
Yes, we had a resub from Macken at the beginning of the stream. We didn't get to thank you before, so let's do it now. Macken, thank you very, very much for the resubscription. And we also got a resub from Aegis, who is also now helping us keep track of these subs. And he had a 24-month resub, which means he's been subbed for 2 years. So thank you very, very much for that. Yes. And for people in the chat, for being loyal and just, listening, staying around, chatting, there is a system that we have called Nether Shards, which you earn just by being in chat while the stream is live. And using these Nether Shards, you can redeem different prizes or different things. I believe, it's right here. So if you scroll down, there's a little box, little panel thing where you can see Wowhead plushie, for example, Wowhead Weekly pin, and some other things too. Murloc pin even. You can use these points in order to redeem all of these different things. So it's actual physical items that you can get just by watching the stream. So I think it's a pretty nice system. If you're feeling very very brave, you can also try to gamble and get a lot of points, but I did see 20 minutes ago or so that Tenno tried that and he lost all of his points. So
no.
Might want to be careful with it. But yeah, it's just a little side thing to for like Wowheads to give back to you guys supporting. So
yeah.
Oh no, Moronblooded went all in and lost every single one of his 5,000 nether shards. Well, rip. So yeah, it's just a little side thing so you guys are aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, next up we have the topic of mounts being introduced. And this was actually something that was announced just a couple hours ago. Well, maybe not a couple hours ago anymore, but a couple hours before the show. There is a new shop mount with the special deal like we have seen recently of being able to obtain the mount by having a 6-month subscription. So you can choose to get the mount with the regular way of purchasing a shop mount, or you can decide to, if you are planning to play WoW anyways, you can decide to buy game time for half a year and then in effect get the mount for free. Let me get some images.
And if you already are on a 6-month recurring subscription plan, you will get Squeakers for free before January 28th of 2020.
Yes, so if you're already on the subscription, then it will be taken care of. I saw some responses to the tweet when this was announced. People saying, "Oh no, I'm already in a 6-month." Let me turn it down a bit. I saw some people being concerned that they're already 3 months into the 6-month subscription, or that they just renewed it like a week ago. If that happens, don't worry, it will be accounted for.
And so yeah, what is Squeakers? A Squeakers is a rat that can fly.
Yep. I'm just waiting for it to fly now in this little video. There we go. Oh.
Yeah, it's bright green wings.
Oh no, he's off screen. There we go. But yeah, a flying rat. I mean, we did have the flying pig. So having a flying rat may not be that weird. I don't know. It's still very ridiculous.
It wasn't mentioned in the promotional materials, but it is Year of the Rat in China, and they have been revealing. They always have a special China BattleNet site that talks about holiday promotions for every game, and I believe this is the one related to Year of the Rat as well. So it would make sense. Last year it was Year of the Pig, and then before that it was Year of the Dog. So yeah, it makes sense that we get this kind of cute animal that has the neon wings. They tend to do that every year.
Interesting. So as soon as there's a weird mount with wings of an animal that shouldn't have wings, then that can explain it.
I wonder what next year's is. Let's 1 second. I'm looking this up.
Yeah, you can get it, as I mentioned, as a regular mount purchase, just like all the other mounts, or you can get it with a 6-month subscription.
Yeah. So if you look at Chinese New Year, 2021 is going to be the Year of the Ox, and then 2022 is Year of the Tiger, and 2023 is Year of the Rabbit. So we're going to get some fun mounts coming up if they keep with this idea. The tiger one seems really fun, though.
Yeah.
Or the flying bunny. Oh my god, that would be so cute.
Oh, wow. Apparently 2028 Year of the Monkey. Who wants a flying monkey? Wait, we kind of already have flying tigers, I guess. Maybe we'll finally get a tiger that looks like the Swift-Zulian tiger. You know, like an orange tiger.
Yeah, Swift-Zulian tiger that has neon
wings.
Orange wings.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get a big bright paw.
Sometimes I get sad that we don't get so many, like, realistic-looking exotic animals. So, like, for example, the Swift-Zulian tiger, one of the reasons why I found it a really cool mount is that it looks so... realistic, not maybe in pixels but in colors, you know, being orange and black stripes. And the zebra, the old recruiter friend mount, was also really cool. So having more mounts like that look very simple and very similar to how the animal looks in real life can sometimes actually be really cool.
Yeah, so fingers crossed we get a bunny mount in a few years. You heard it here first. Bunny mount 2023.
2023 bunny mount. Already speculating. Or predicting even.
So there are over 20 new mounts in the patch, but we just wanted to highlight a few interesting things with the mounts, because we know you're probably already, you know, naturally getting some of these mounts by killing rares and doing activities. The Shadow Barb Hatchling is a mount we've talked about before, and you can go to Uldum right now and start the daily quest line for it. It will take around a month of daily quests to do, and you will get a toy, a pet, and a mount if you do the entire quest line, and you also get to name your creepy little bug as well, which is cute. So, you know, definitely unlock the assaults, go to Uldum and start doing the dailies. There's also a component that requires you to do some pet battling with the mount out, and we've prepared some 2 pet strategies so you can have the pet out, but also, you know, still beat the encounter. So, what other mounts stood out to you besides the hatchling? Because everyone at Wowhead's like, oh, you know, Reginald, he's so cute and bitey and weird and eats annoying people.
Cute?
So
are you sure about
that? Most personality. What'd you say?
Are you sure about cute?
Well, he's I don't know, he's very cute and creepy. You know, you raise him for a month, you feel a little attached. You feel a little attached to him. He's sort of like your wayward child.
Yeah. You're seeing the hatching progress go through every day.
Yeah.
For every daily that you do, it goes up. So that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
And he probably has a cute personality too.
Yeah.
One mount that I wanted to mention is the alpaca mount in Vol'dun.
Yeah.
It's a rare mount, or rare NPC, I guess you could call it. A rare alpaca that can show up completely randomly. And if it is up, what you have to do is feed. Is it feeding? I'm not sure if it's feeding, but you need to have this item that you give.
The handful of grass.
Yes.
You have to feed it to it.
Yeah, I guess it's feeding. Yeah. So you give the item to the alpaca, and when you do, you get rewarded with a mount, which looks like this.
And there are 2 other tints of the alpaca as well. One is through killing the world boss, so rip, that's probably difficult. But we finally do have some alpaca mounts, and they match perfectly with Dottie, who is the alpaca charity pet.
Wait, I think the feeding one is the other one. So I think there's 2 alpacas. Well, there's
There
more,
are
but
3. There are 3. I'm pulling it up. One sec. So let's see, alpaca.
because I think the feeding one.
The spring fur alpaca is from the daily alpaca it up, and that's the medium brown one. Where is this? Then there's 2 from Vol'dun. The elusive Quickhoof is from the rare spawn, and that's black.
Yeah.
And then the damp pile of fur is the brown one from Dune Gorger Crawlock.
Gotcha.
So the black one, elusive Quickhoof, is from the rare spawn you need to feed in Vol'dun. Another one that I wanted to highlight as well that people really liked on Wowhead. There were 2 mounts that were notable because they were from past expansions, but their coloration wasn't used. One is the Ivory Cloud Serpent. I think it's kind of pink. But you have to get a special lasso and then use it on a cloud serpent in Vale of Eternal Blossoms. And people it's a cloud serpent. It was added in MoP, and didn't see the light of day until now. So I think it's cool that Blizzard found a way to add that in. And then another one that I think is neat is in Cataclysm, there was a series of these Drake of the North, South winds that had all these lightning effects on them. And now there is another coloration from a rare in Uldum. So I think it's nice how those models, after being in the vault for 10 years, have finally seen the light of day.
I found it pretty a nice little detail with it being called the 4 winds, since we have the west wind, south wind, east wind, north wind, and now it's the 4 winds. So that's pretty cool. I remember the south wind, the one that it's the rare drop from Alec here, I believe, and that one was the one that took the longest for me because it was a really rare drop. So it's pretty cool to be reminded of that with a new mount that matches them.
Yeah, and if you're a new player, maybe you'll be like, "Oh, this is cool. This implies there's other mounts from Winds. Oh, look, there's others, from Uldum I could get." So maybe this will encourage people to go back and farm the other ones if they, get this one. I think some are easier than others. You have the Vortex Pinnacle and Alakir, which are the difficult ones because they're the rare spawns, and then you have the Glory of the Cataclysm Hero and then Tolbarad, which are the ones that are easier to grind out.
Or rare drops, but the content itself shouldn't be very hard, at least now.
Yeah, it's just time consuming.
Yeah. You may have to, if you're unlucky, you run 100 runs,
Yeah.
Another
I think it
one
was up to 400 runs for the one from Vortex Pinnacle. It took a really long time.
Oh my god, really?
It was, I wasn't at 120 doing it. It was after Cataclysm, but I was a rogue, so I could stealth past stuff, but there still was a sense that it was slightly annoying when you would, if you failed, because, I wasn't out leveling it by 60 levels or so.
That was one of the few dungeon mounts that I actually got while doing the dungeon randomly to level.
Oh, grats.
Yeah, it was it was very, very surprising. I did not expect that, because I was getting ready to start farming it. Right. Another mount that I think is notable is similar to the Ivory mount, a serpent which looks really, really pretty. It's a bit more whitish, bluish, and it also looks slightly electric, which I think looks really cool.
And speaking of cats, because we have a cat that's returned, if you do Heroic Darkshore, you can unlock access to another Nightsaber mount that you can purchase with service medals, but you need to win Heroic Darkshore. So,
and
yeah,
another
it's
mount
a
for
lightsaber.
the season mount as well.
Oh yeah, you can get another cat if you're alliance that way. Isn't that right, Paw?
So for getting
Paw
100% in the
show.
progression, you can get this mount. Yeah, Brightpaw is very happy about the cat mounts, of course. And the Horde version of this is... Let's see if we
The
can
skeletal.
find it.
The Horde can still get the Nightsaber through the service medals, but they their seasonal mount is the skeletal warhorse instead.
Yeah, I think those were the main notable ones. There's a bunch of different mounts. Some that are drops from some rares, and some that are vendor mounts. There's a lot of mounts to look forward to. You can check out the
There's a whole
mount
series
guide.
of like creepy eel things from Horrific Visions and Ny'alotha, like the male muncher. That's a fun name. It eats the male.
Yeah. I'm gonna link the mount guide there for 8.3. And yeah, the doubloons.
The doubloons, yeah.
Yeah, so the first thing that I did when I logged on to the patch was actually not the introductory quest. What I did was go to the Isle Expedition vendor and purchase a bunch of boxes for my, what are they called?
The Seafarer doubloons.
Seafarer doubloons. Yes. So I went there and spent all my doubloons immediately for a bunch of boxes and managed to get 3 of the Island Expedition mounts. So this is a new way of being able to obtain the mounts, which have previously been extremely rare. People have run thousands of runs of Isle Expeditions just to be able to get all of the mounts. And now you have use for the potentially thousands of doubloons that you may have, stacked up in all those runs, but not been able to get the mounts. So be sure to use those doubloons for the different crates if you want to get some of the mounts that you may be missing. The Crestfall package, for example, is one that contains Squawks, which is the green parrot, which I think is one of the coolest ones.
I also want to say that based on the flavor text on the items, you might think that you have a very limited pool of items, but it's misleading. There's actually a larger pool of mounts that are associated with each doubloon box.
Yeah.
So, for example, we're like, oh, this one says pirate, Squawks is in it. Then it's like, oh, well, many other mounts can be in this, not just, the pirate themed loot.
Yep.
So we're updating our loot tables for that, but yeah, they seem pretty wide. You can have a ton of cool stuff in each box, it looks like.
Yeah, those boxes are constantly being updated, so don't feel limited. Feel free to check Wowhead, the comments and the guides themselves, because those boxes are constantly being updated as more and more mounts are being found. For example, the moose seems to be dropping in almost all of the boxes. So
yeah, but you wouldn't think it would, because it isn't. The moose sounds very specific, but hey, it's dropping all of them. That's cool.
Yeah. So, you should definitely check those out. And if you have been doing Island Expeditions on alts as well, you may want to check your alts too to see if you have enough doubloons. I believe it was 175 doubloons per box.
Yep. So, in sort of mount-related news, there is
flying
something
news
in the patch, which is sad news for your flying mounts, which is called the Great Worm from Beyond. And it applies a debuff to your flying mount and slows it, and the debuff can keep stacking, so at the end of it, it will be even slower than a ground mount.
Yes.
And it shows up in the assault zones, so while you can fly to the assault, and you don't need Pathfinder, because, it's an old world zone, the Great Worm from Beyond makes your life difficult and sad.
Yeah. It's a funny little detail. It randomly just zapped me, and then I saw the debuff, and I was like, wait, what? Why am I flying slower now? And apparently it stacks up to 11 times, at which point it's probably better to just, go to the ground and
Yeah,
step
your
onto
mount
you.
is at 50% movement speed at that point
Yeah.
because you're going, yeah, it's not good.
Just
Yeah,
get on a
you're-
ground mount instead.
yeah, like you were going slower than if you were walking. So
Yep.
that is not good.
Yep. It's really bad.
Yeah, so what are your thoughts on this? Because it does add flavor, but I feel it's like not fun flavor.
Um, Honestly, I think it's fine flavor. I think it is a fun little detail because I feel like something that flying did to the world in general in WoW is that it's given us a sort of safety net where nobody can reach us, neither mobs or players. Well, in some cases, maybe players if there's a cliff and they use the Nidomatic to dismount you. But it feels okay because sometimes when you go around the world, it should feel a little bit dangerous, you know? Like a big monster, especially, I think we had this a lot before flying, where if you ran in certain areas, there would be like a very, very big mob that you definitely want to avoid. So I think it does add a little bit of annoyance that's not too annoying, that makes it interesting and forces you to fly a little bit lower. I don't know if it's the right thing to do, if that specific mechanic is good, but I think it's nice to have something that makes it a little bit like you can't just AFK in the air, you know?
Yeah, I think it would be nice if there's a little more finesse to it,
Yeah.
because I think Wrath worked well. How everything felt very like dangerous on the ground, and then you started flying in Ice Crown, and it was still kind of dangerous in the air, and you had to pick where you were going to land, or there was even stuff in the air that could hurt you as well. But it felt I don't know, it felt kind of epic that you could fly to new areas. I feel like this is purely not fun. Maybe
Okay.
going with the corruption vibe, it could be interesting if like you could fly, but you would start taking damage, or like your character would start glowing.
Yeah,
Like something
I
would happen
agree.
to your character the longer it was on it. So you at least had a sense of like, oh, I'm still getting a benefit out of this, but something bad is also happening to me, as opposed to purely like bad, you know, like just something playing upon that, you know, pros and cons at the same time.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. If it would apply like a corruption effect on you for 3 minutes,
Yeah.
something that is maybe a bit more focused on the bad thing, maybe not slowing you because that's kind of like a handicap, but rather make you take a bit of damage, or maybe reduce some of your stats, or something could be a bit more less intrusive to the gameplay, but still not good. So it feels kind of dangerous to be there. I think that could be maybe a big variation of different buffs and debuffs that it could throw on you. So maybe if you're lucky or unlucky, I guess depends how you see it, you get some kind of berserker buff, maybe like 30% more damage, 30% more damage taken. I think
also be interesting if like maybe you had the debuffs or a chance of something to go wrong, but there was a little area that you could only reach with flying. Like remember in Tanan Jungle how the whole eastern part was you could only reach it through flying, and then you could farm the area for some of the toys, or by High Mall it had the little elemental pets. I feel like maybe if there was a part of the assault that you could reach with flying, and yes, you could get slowed down along the way, but you could reach this special little area, and then you could, I don't know, farm more rares there, or have something interesting to make it worth the challenge of, you know, the annoyance of being slowed by flying and getting there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think there
we'll
can
see.
definitely be some more creativity around it. I do like the idea of it, though, that you're not safe in the sky, but maybe
Right.
having a bit of variety in terms of what it can do to you could make it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, especially because this sort of came as testing went on, this came to people's attention over the Christmas break. So I feel like without any Blizzard news, it was like, oh my god, did you know that there's this worm and it's killing it's
Yeah.
slowing everyone, and you can't even, you're slower than walking with flying. Like I feel that in the lack of news and new things to discuss, this worm kind of dominated the news cycle. It certainly got a lot of comments on Wowhead when we posted about it. So, but yeah, why don't we talk about allied races a little bit more, because there's been a ton of confusion surrounding the mechanomes, especially. And then, so first off, there is a 30% off. Sorry if my mic made noise. 30% off race change sale, and they usually don't do these. I think the last time they did was when other allied races went on sale. So to get those done, that runs until February 3rd. You know, good timing if you are trying to change for, you know, maybe you want to have your Death Knight be a new allied race, but you don't want to grind them from scratch because of, you know, account-wide essences, or you want to change for a Nyalotha progression.
Yeah, keep in mind, if you race change, that does not make you eligible for the heritage armors. If you want the heritage armors, you need to level all the way, and with all the way, the Death Knight leveling does count. So leveling from 58 or 55 to 110 is enough to unlock the heritage armor. You don't have to start from level 20 on non-DK classes.
Right. So there is a lot of confusion surrounding the Mechanome allied race, because the achievements to do the quest line are, you know, slightly different for the Alliance and Horde, and for the Volpera, you have to, you know, do the Horde specific quest lines. So people are like, oh, do I have to do, you know, Alliance things for Mechanomes? That's so much more harder than the Volpera, since, you know, Mechagon is kind of a max level area requiring the Najatar questline. So Blizzard confirmed that Horde players can do the Mechagon achievement, and that was unclear. So you don't need to be Alliance. You can be Horde and do it, but it was unclear because there was a UI bug that made players think they didn't have completion credit when they did. So you can do the story on Horde, do the reputation on Horde, and then log on a max level Alliance character and do the unlock scenario like every other
oh, that's interesting.
line.
Yeah. So Hordes can unlock Mechanomes.
Yeah. I think that's how it worked for all the other allied races. I think the confusion was that none of the other allied races were tied to, you know, that max, like sort of max level, max progression quest line like the Mechanomes were. Also, Blizzard clarified that you can do the components of the Operation Mechagon part of the quest line in the new heroic mode as well. So that should make something easier as well for players trying to unlock that.
Okay.
And as a side note, when I was writing up all the transmog details, just, you know, if you're planning out your transmog, I know early on in the PTRs there were Mechanomes that had some older body parts covered. You cannot transmog your gloves, feet, and wrist as Mechanomes, and you can transmog pants, but it's just your lower waist, not your legs. So they're kind of exposed, and I know some people were. You can, you know, change how you want the metal parts to look, but I know, you know, people like having full sets of armor, so, you know, some people were a little sad you couldn't transmog those slots, but it makes me think that, you know, people were always like, oh, like, why can't the Naga be an allied race? Oh, you know, they don't have feet. It makes me wonder if they ever revisit allied races, if we could see more allied races that don't have every
all
armor
limbs.
slot.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Mechanomes are only really a few slots that they can transmog.
It's basically just the chest then.
Yeah, it's just the chest, shoulders, a diaper, and the helm, and the cloak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, who knows? Maybe if they have the tech for this, maybe we'd see Naga or other interesting creatures becoming allied races in the future.
Yeah, I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Which brings us to our next topic, which was some interesting transmog updates. There's a lot of different things going on. Obviously not as flashy as something like Horrific Visions, but there was a ton of stuff when we look closer at it, so we just wanted to highlight a few of the things you might want to be aware of as you're, you know, you're logging in and sorting your character out. First thing is that Legend... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we've mentioned most of these before, but it's nice to be reminded since 8.3 is actually here. So, yeah, go ahead.
So you can transmog legendary weapons, except for demon hunters only can transmog the Warglaze of Azeroth through
that
unlocking...
caused a lot of discussion.
I mean, it's weird. Like, I know they don't want to take it away from the demon hunters, but there were that was sort of the first legend. Well, one of the first legendaries people really
It meant
farmed. Like, that
something.
was a
Yeah.
huge deal during Black Temple, and it was needed for Sunwell progression. So there are a lot of, rogues and warriors that have, fond memories of farming that back in the day. And it feels a little weird that you can't transmog it.
Yeah. That's
So
exactly how I was thinking
yeah,
about it too. Because I can understand lore wise how it feels a little bit special for demon hunters to be able to transmog them, but the fact that no demon hunters played at the time and any original character who was in there and actually obtained them even during content, not even thinking about the people who farmed it later on, that those characters can't use them, it just feels wrong. If I have spent time and have, like you mentioned, very fond memories of using or farming and then also using a specific item, and then later be told that I can't use it on these old nostalgic characters, but instead have to have a demon hunter to use it as a transmog, feels a little bit weird.
yeah. Like I definitely had a farming group of people in, Wrath. Like, we would run Black Temple for the glaives, we would run Sunwell for the bow. We kept doing Ulduar runs during Ice Crown to get people the healer
Mm-hmm.
legendary,
Mm-hmm.
and Shadowmourne. And it feels weird being like, oh, all the other people in my group that I was helping farm can transmog their weapons except for the one I got.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but overall, it's a positive change. I just wish they didn't have the restriction on the warglaives.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe demon hunters could have had, I don't
Maybe
know,
different tint.
yeah, a different tint. I feel like that could work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just I wish I could transmog my warglaives.
Yeah, yeah. Especially if you were somebody who played at the time. I mean, even people who farm today, like it could still take up to a year to actually get both items
Yeah.
on the same character. So I feel like I feel like people should be able to transmog them, and if they wanted demon hunters to have something special, I think it should have been a different tint. Yeah, or even a
Yeah.
higher res model, as mentioned in the chat.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
In other news, Death Knights and several other races have new eye glows. The Death Knight is the most memorable because it looks like Arthas wearing the helm now, how the eyes are blue and there's little smoke coming out of the side.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a nice touch. And that is all Death Knights get that, even the ones made before patch 8.3. And the new eye glows are kind of laying the foundation for what we're going to see with more eye customization in Shadowlands.
Yep.
So that is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
As you mentioned several times, you can transmog a backpack as a cloak now without needing to pay lots of money through Recruit a Friend or the BlizzCon Wendigo thing. But it's still, you need to do a lot of horrific visions, and then Wrathian will sell it to you.
Yep.
And as we said before, we're not sure what exactly it's made out of, but it is very fashionable and matches his outfit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. If you think Wrathian looks good, then you can be confident that Wrathian would approve of your style if you purchase one of these bags.
Yep. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight, but feel free if you have other things, is that when you complete the Death Knight starting quest, you can acquire a new weapon, and it's the normal tints as well as a burning tint because Bolvar is fiery. If you're an old Death Knight and you're like, man, I want that too, you can just go to the Quartermaster and purchase those weapons for a very trivial amount of money, and then have those appearances for transmog. I think that's a detail people aren't super aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good to know.
So, were there any other transmog details that stood out? I know that when Season 4 comes, we're going to have even more, armor sets to choose from in PvE and PvP.
Mm-hmm. Nothing in particular right now. I think mostly I was just looking at the whole legendary thing, and I'm happy at least my staff that I got in Cataclysm isn't locked onto some kind of new class. My warlock can actually use the legendary that she once earned. But I do feel bad for the people who played a rogue or warrior back in TBC and can't transmog their item.
Yeah. So I think we should close up the show with some classic news that occurred over the break.
Yep.
We have a release date for Blackwing Lair. That is February 12th. And I think surprising some people, that's also when the Sunken Temple class quests are coming, because if we were going by a very strict patch breakdown, they would have been a little later, but they are coming with Blackwing Lair, and they have some cool items. I don't know if there's still upgrades with how everything has been all jumbled together, but back in the day in Vanilla, there were some welcome upgrades, especially for I think the Diamond Flask for warriors. So that's coming. They're kind of little fun quests. They have to be level 50 or higher to do. Also, you can do the attunement quest for Blackwing Lair now in advance.
Yep.
And the Dark Moon Fair is coming the week of February 7th, which means you can start farming the cards. Well, the cards aren't in the game now, but when the fair is around, you can start collecting cards and turning them in and getting the special Dark Moon trinkets. And they were pretty wild back in the day. Like, there was a card that let you resurrect, which I know is very handy in PvP. So that is coming along pretty soon. And it makes people wonder, you know, there are still no PvP updates. You know, Blizzard has shown that they're willing to kind of play hard and fast with when deadlines are coming out. You know, Sunken Temple and Blackwing Lair did not come out at the same time, but they are releasing that content together. But, you know, a lot of people were saying that the battlegrounds were imbalanced and not fun and not in the spirit of Vanilla. And there hasn't been any updates on those. And it's just tricky. Like, I know it's fun. Changing them is fundamentally different than saying, okay, we'll release Sunken Temple, you know, a few weeks earlier. But if they're already messing with no changes, would it be that big of a deal to, I don't know, use an earlier version of AV or something different to, I don't know, make it more enjoyable?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of complaints from a lot of content creators as well. Content creators who specifically have been for Classic and have been not only looking forward to Classic for since it's been released, even before that, you know, people who've been fighting for Vanilla to become a thing in the first place, being quite disappointed with the honor system, feeling like Warsome Gulch doesn't feel rewarding and Altreich Valley doesn't feel fun, and Altreich Valley just giving way too much honor for the effort put in. And I think some kind of balancing of rewards for the BGs, I think, could be healthier for the spirit of the game itself. Because I think people today are a lot more goal-oriented compared to how we were back then. So while back then it may not have been a problem if this is how the game worked, it is a problem now because people are, you know, a lot more likely to be min-maxing things, not only their time, but also the type of items that you want to use. Then having something like this is kind of game-breaking.
Yeah, and I think we discussed this in the last show, how the anniversary version of AV on live felt more challenging than the classic version of AV, just because of how the mob and health scaling was. So I don't know. I mean, I feel that if they want everything to be in the spirit of Vanilla, and they keep saying they want things to be in the spirit, like, you know, we're not going to have an API, we're not going to have certain add-ons work, you know, without an API, you can't have things like a Twitch extension. If they want to preserve a feeling of Vanilla WoW, then maybe that should be extended to some of the PvP things.
Yeah.
Especially because it was so anticipated, like, people were not being cynical. It was like, people were like, oh, you know, Classic is really going to start when PvP comes out. And it's like, whoa, this is a turnaround from what everyone thought.
Yeah.
Like, it, you know, sort of like killed people's enthusiasm.
But I am happy the BGs came out at least, because especially with playing on a server that's very horde dominated, it's not fun as an Alliance player, being outside in the world, especially areas such as Winterspring. But with the BGs being in place, at least it's a little bit more playable, so that's good. Although I think the horde is experiencing longer queues, so you still come across a lot more horde than Alliance when you go outside.
Yeah. So Well, fingers crossed we'll see some updates with AB
Mm-hmm.
or, so many people talking about this, lots of prominent people. Maybe
Yeah.
Blizzard will make a reply because it seems pretty unanimous in.
Yeah, exactly. It
feedback,
does feel
so.
very unanimous.
Yeah, and like we have seen a decrease to some classic content. As they
Wowhead.
announce these battlegrounds, like no one checks out our Warsong guide. Like it doesn't seem like someone is just saying this for drama. It seems to be a trend.
Yeah, and I'm sure they see the stats as well. How many people queue up for Warsong? How many people queue up for AV? How much actual actions people make or take when they're inside of these BGs? Like, are most people just standing still? Are most people engaging in 1 combat per BG, 5 combats per BG?
Is anyone summoning the elemental bosses, or are they just zerging? I'm sure they can see all this.
Of course, yeah. They must see everything. Maybe they're just thinking about what the best way to approach it is, because there's not always one best way to do things. So I'm sure they're considering different ways of handling it as well, and just haven't really come to one.
And what happens if they change something and then it's like, oh, Warsong is much better to do. Let's all zerg Warsong now. And then it's like, okay, well, this isn't,
Yeah.
No, you don't want to some people win trading Warsong and then nobody runs AV.
Oh yeah, that's true. Win trading could then be an issue, because I was gonna say, well, I think having Warsong be better is probably better anyways, because in Warsong you can't really just kind of passively play and AFK, because people will report you and then you get kicked. Whereas in AV, a lot of people can just AFK and it doesn't matter because there's so many players.
Yeah. So I think that about wraps up our notes. If you have any questions for us, let us know. We also have an article on Wowhead that has links to all the show topics if you want to learn more about anything we covered.
Yep. Everything we talked about are covered in different articles, so feel free to check out all of them, or some of them, whichever ones that you find interesting. And they're all available on Wowhead's website.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much it. That was the first show of the year.
Yeah, we will have a special guest for next show. We will reveal it next week. But it should be a fun show because we will have the raid open. We will have the, end of the expansion cinematic to discuss.
Oh, yeah.
We will have Method and Limit have both announced their Race to World First events. So we will have that gearing up to discuss as well, the Mythic predictions. So it'll be a fun show. We'll have lots to go over. Definitely.
It's going to be a very lively show with lots to cover. It's nice that we're able to fit in this show before all that happens.
Yeah. I'm glad I was able to fit this in, even in spite of
because you've barely been home.
Yeah, I unpacked from my New York trip on Tuesday, and then I unpacked from the China trip on Wednesday.
Yep.
So I still have stuff to clean up, but I'm not living out of a suitcase anymore, which is good.
Yeah, that's nice. Progress.
Yeah.
I was actually supposed to.
Cat hoodie on.
Yeah, speaking of clothing, I was actually planning to, when we talk about the mount section, be like, hey, I've got this really cool mount collector shirt that WoW had sent to me. But then I'm feeling so cold, actually, that I kind of feel like, what? I think I'm going to zip this for now. I'll show off the shirt another time. It's actually so cold in Sweden and in my apartment. But it's nice to have new patches, new things to do, new mounts to farm, new pets, new transmog, new everything. And next week that'll be more exciting because then we have the actual raids to start progressing to.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for joining us on our first show of 2020.
Yep.
And we have a lot of cool things lined up as well, as far as guests and some channel updates too, so stay tuned. There might be some things looking different and fresh in a few weeks.
Yep. Fresh is always nice. Thank you everyone for hanging out and for supporting, for listening. Hopefully you guys learned something new today, and maybe were inspired to start something that you hadn't thought about before, because there are quite a few things and new patches that we may oversee as we're playing. Maybe forget something and then be reminded is quite nice. So with that, we will be back next week, same time, with a special guest.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we can do the handshake.
Oh,
again.
yeah. So, yes, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. All right. 3, 2, 1.
Pew! Yes.
Yay.
Oh,
Felt good to
almost
do that.
as effective as Anduin's punch. Almost.
Yes.
No, that's great. High five always. Can't forget that.
Oh, we summoned the cat back. Very
See?
good.
That's the way how to get a cat. So if you're wondering how to summon your cat, that's the secret ritual. Now you know.
Get your hand up.
But yeah, thank you to everyone and see you again next week.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Say goodbye, Bright Paw. Bye.